Man, Chicago is burning up.
Yeah.
Check this out.
In the city of Chicago, murder rates are high and continue to climb, according to the Chicago Police Department. This year, the city has seen a total of 141 murders, compared to 82 murders last year. There have been 677 shootings in the city this year, compared to 359 in 2015. And there have been 677 shooting victims in the city, compared to 411 victims last year. Mayor Rahm Emanuel stated, "We have a level of shootings and gun violence that's unacceptable and must come to an end. It means we have to have a leadership and a lead from the front and get not only our officers' morale level up, but our violence level down." So why is this happening? Well, police say the rise in violence is driven by gangs, mostly contained to the city's south and west sides. However, investigative journalists and Fight Crime Invest in Kids, a nonprofit anti-crime organization, are linking the rise in crime to the shutting down of schools and the high unemployment rate. The Chicago Tribune reported that nearly half of young black men in Chicago are out of school or out of work. Since 2013, Mayor Rahm Emanuel has closed down more than 50 schools in Chicago in low-income areas heavily populated by blacks. Now, those students have to walk long distances to attend overcrowded schools because schools aren't equipped to properly handle a large volume of students. Students drop out at alarming rates, lacking knowledge and work experience, thus adding to the unemployment rate. So many end up partaking in illegal activities such as joining gangs, adding to the rise in crime and the rise in homicides.
All right. What do you think about this report?
And man, you know, it's a sad situation. It's a sad story, man. Is that a lot of what's going on in Chicago is a result of fatherlessness.
Yeah.
You know, these guys are joining gangs because they're looking for structure. You know, over 73%, according to the national data of black and brown families, are growing up without a father in the home. And so it's interesting, man, is that, you know, because if you think about the structure of a gang and gun violence and all this type of stuff like this, they give you your identity. Your father's supposed to give you your identity. And a lot of these guys are growing up without seeing a man in the home. And so they're looking for something. And so they don't have any value for life because the father's supposed to instill that in you. And it's sad, man, is that, you know, we focus on everything else when it comes to the black community about what you know, quote unquote, the man is doing. However, we're not focusing on raising sons to grow up to be men, to take care of their families. And so I think that's what's really going on in Chicago, man.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, there's a undermining of culture, right?
Right.
Culture affects behavior. It's not just about political strength. Here you got Chicago. This is the state, the city that our president emerged from. This is a state, Illinois, that has a lot of black congressmen, senators, mayors. It's had, you know, city officials. So it's not that blacks haven't achieved political power in Chicago. It's that as they've done that, the culture has become diminished. And, you know, you narrowed in on the issue of fatherhood and how critical that is. But there's a wider issue of the culture in these black communities that has lost its ability to compete in the marketplace, right? There isn't technology emerging out of these places. There isn't innovation. There isn't art and the type of basic products and services that Chicagoans need, the state needs, the world needs. So you know, and that's a mindset. That is a culture of victimization and consumption, but not producing. And that's not something that the government can fix unless the government acknowledges it's outside of its ability. That this power lies only in the individual soul. The soul of an individual, right? A man has to say, you know what? I'm going to raise my family. I'm not going to have sex out of wedlock. We have over 78% of black children born out of wedlock today, where in 1930 it was less than the white community. It was below, I believe it was like 20% of the, there was a shame and honor culture in the black community. And since you have the democratic social philosophy that was really instituted by Roosevelt in the 30s and then grew in the 60s with Johnson and the war on poverty, which replaced fathers with welfare, right? And promised to take care of black poverty through federal aid, through government institutions. You have the diminishing of these black communities like Chicago. And the politicians don't want to admit that this is something that is cultural, that only God can fix, that only the church can disciple through that. And they need to stop having policies that are anti-family, that are pro-family, and protect and celebrate that institution of marriage and family.
There's a scripture that says you must first bind the strong man in order to get the goods of the home. In order for any family to be destroyed, the enemy's number one job is to get the man out of the home.
Yeah.
And the man's job is to protect the wife, the son, and the daughter. He is the protector. He's the identity. He's the identifier of what's supposed to go on in the home. And I think you actually touched on something earlier about the Democratic Liberal Party, is that, prior to that, everybody had conservative views when it came to family.
Yeah.
One of the things in social science is that when you get a research consensus, is that you have conservatives and you have liberals who both agree that people who are raised by two-parent homes, come from two-parent homes, the positive outcome when it comes to children is miraculous. You see the difference. And that's not to say that people who are raised by, in single parent homes, that they are, that they're less likely. But the data actually shows that if you're raised in a two-parent home, you're less likely to get involved in gang violence, to get involved in criminal activity. But what I was going to touch on is that the Democratic Party actually pushed the sexual revolution, when it comes to, women and men should be able to do the same thing. And so what happened is that people start engaging in transient affairs when it comes to, I can just sleep with this person and, and not, have to worry about it. However, people are, they started getting pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that rose the fatherless community and the black community. But then, liberals aren't focused on family values.
Yeah. And then you think about this social philosophy, right? Like, it's okay for us to condone, like, let's say the misogynist and violent lyrics within hip hop, right? And if you speak out against it, you're being an Uncle Tom. You know what I'm saying? But yet they're saying that the violence in Chicago is at an all-time high. And the whites are saying, look, black people are more violent than us. And all the civil rights leaders within our community and our pastors. Now, I'm from the belief that all cultures have particular sins they struggle with more than other cultures.
Right.
Right? White greed is different than black violence. But yet it's very evident. I mean, you got this banking crisis, you have Wall Street, you have the housing debacle that happened. I mean, these weren't black people, right? Blacks weren't flying in drugs from Cuba and Colombia, right? I mean, slavery was about greed, even as Africans participated in that. It's corporate greed. So the greed of Apple is different than the violence of the streets, right? The violence of the gangsters in Chicago. But all the data, according to the Department of Justice, is that despite blacks making up just 13% of the population, blacks commit around half of the homicides in the United States. And they show that between 1980 and 2008, blacks committed 52% of homicides compared to 45% of homicides committed by whites. Now, this is the irony. We as blacks committed more murders than whites, but whites make up 60% of the population and blacks make up 13. So there is something within the culture, right? And you see it in the music. And if you speak out against it and you try to redirect the mind of a young black man towards being like Christ, being an entrepreneur, being an innovator, being a scholar, then that's frowned upon. So and if you call it out as a prophet to your own people because you love your people, right? Just like the Israeli prophets pointed the finger to Israel and said, you're in sin. But if you do that, then you're an Uncle Tom, and you're basically associating yourself with the white Republicans because black people shouldn't call black people out. Then who should? If whites call us out, they're racist. If Latinos call us out, who are they? If black leadership we don't begin to disciple, apprentice, and prophesy to our own people, how is Chicago ever going to change?
You know, the interesting thing about it is that we're always looking for some leader to come save us from a platform standpoint, instead of let's take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Let's take some personal accountability. That's not to say that, racism
doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. But however, we have to do our part. You understand what I'm saying? And so,
well, our parents taught us, right? Even if someone is bullying you and mistreating you, it doesn't mean that you act like a bully, that you lose your composure. And that's what we're ultimately, that's what Booker T. Washington was trying to say. We need to focus on black enterprise, black family. Okay? Even as we deal with the political, institutional racism. But that needs to be the third priority. Because if you don't have internal power on a communal level, and your communities are diminished economically, the families are disintegrated, which is where we are.
Right.
Du Bois argued political activism needs to be first. And that's the shift we took in the early 1900s, especially with the development of the NAACP. That's what the black nationalist movement, the Black Panther movement, and they were a little different. They also recognized we need to have black development,
right?
Black capitalism. So they got it. But there hasn't been this push, and the church should be in the forefront of this.
Right.
That we need to first repent. We need to regulate our own souls. We need to be men of God within our own families and marriages. That's the first important institution. We need to train and teach our kids above the top priority, not leave it up to the public sector that's failed us.
Right.
Right? And then we need to start focusing on economic growth. And then we need to prioritize political power. But it always has to be about freedom and empowerment through processes that are natural. Meaning, we need to promote black enterprise and capitalism and morality, and not just say, well, we're victims, and my destiny is in the hands of white people.
Right. I agree.
Even tried to school you